There's two stories that I like to reflect on when telling the story of how the film began. And the first one was the very beginnings of this film was in 2014 when I went out to breakfast with my friend. I'd had natural hair for a long time. It was about 2013, 2012, and people were getting on Instagram, and I felt a lot of pressure to kind of change my look from my natural hair to a more, Instagram kind of look with straight hair and like long nails and stuff. And I remember telling my friend this, and he got so upset with me, and he started mentioning things like my racial identity, and we had a big argument about this because I was like, what has race got to do with any of the way I want to look? I went home to research Black identity and hair, and I just dived into a rabbit hole where I really learned about the history of colonialism and slavery and apartheid, and how the way that Black people look is exactly the reason. It is because our physical attributes have been imbued with these different meanings that makes us seem as if we're inferior compared to other races. The story came back to me again when Nelson Mandela died, and we had to go to his funeral with my friends. And I remember we were singing at the funeral different struggle songs, anti-apartheid struggle songs, to honor him. And I remember there was one song called "My Mother Was a Kitchen Girl, My Father Was a Garden Boy." And I remember going, yes, I grew up in apartheid, yes, I'm Black, but I came from another kind of place where there was a bit of a nice childhood, and I didn't have white people in my childhood and didn't really understand apartheid or know it. And so it became an exploration of trying to understand what my personal history was and why I had not realized that I'm Black for such a long time. It's been a 10-year project of self-exploration, but it's also been a project of understanding my identity through my countries, Transkei being one, South Africa being the other. I feel like many people in our country and in the world did not know about the Transkei. It really became a project that then was also about how do I love myself? Because I've been raised in a world, on one hand, quite sheltered and ignorant, and on the other, very much not loving myself as a Black person. And I had to face that. We wouldn't have done any of this without the backing and the support and the knowledge systems that I come from in Southern Africa. First of all, just the confidence to make a film. It felt to me like my ancestors had sent me on a mission. I come from people who have always been writers and musicians and people who are interested in the form of art, obviously, because Black people weren't allowed to make films for a very long time. And I feel like they said, go and do this and we will help you. And in so doing, you will resurrect us and the ways in which we were suppressed and couldn't make films. And so that was just the personal backing that I had. I always knew that I had the support. But also, what do they want to say through this medium? Rituals are normal where I come from. It's a part of my life. I just wanted to invite the audience into this is how we understand existence. This is how we interact with time and space. And it's Christianity that was also there, as well as indigenous knowledge systems and African Xhosa cosmologies that came together in the film because they come together in my life. It's just a reflection of trying to figure out how do we put on screen the questions that I have in my mind about the complexities of these relationships and asking, can we be friends with these histories that we hold? If the power dynamics between us are, on one hand, we can be like, oh, yes, we're friends, we get along. But deep down, power in my body is different from power in a white body. I knew we couldn't avoid, we knew this when we were still fundraising, that we can't avoid our dynamic. If she's the white producer and I'm the Black director, which is something that always happens in Southern Africa. The pairing that I feel needs to be questioned and needs to be opened up, and we need to be a little bit more honest about who gets to be what. And so we knew we couldn't avoid how our relationship affects the way we're making the film. We know that there's the good elements that have allowed us to make a film, but then we knew that there's an underside to that. And this was the biggest challenge, I think, of the whole film, was to reflect something that I'm holding and questions that I'm interested in a way that provokes people, in a way that engages people where they are with this subject. Whenever we put my images and her images on screen, we knew that something happened, something made me uncomfortable. Something in me is just going to be defensive and I'm not going to listen. So we were trying to figure out how we're going to get people to listen with something that is either going to make them uncomfortable or angry or make them connect with these people. And so the decision to take away the picture was about making the audience, inviting them into the space that functioned as a confessional. So that space functioned as that, where I was busy, exposing myself in a way and my own vulnerability around this, my friend, and she too was exposing herself. But also The Black is about a comment on cinema and how cinema has not really dealt with this race thing from a perspective of Black Africans and Black women who are victims of it, and for who haven't been allowed to really participate in filmmaking for a very long time, at least in Southern Africa. And so taking away the light and commenting and saying we want to figure out how do you cinematically represent these things. Racism is not going to be resolved by Black people sitting alone by themselves together. And it's also not going to be solved by white people sitting alone together. We have to figure out how to have conversations. And right now, I feel like we're still, far from resolving some of these things. And so we were just trying to figure out cinematic techniques to deal with a subject that many people can relate to. This film has absolutely changed me. It has been the most incredible privilege to make it because I got to truly deep dive and in so doing create a form of inviting the world to understand what exists in a part of the world that's usually filmed or told by outsiders or foreigners. We hardly have stories where people are really just reflecting themselves. And when I finished the last cut that I watched before we submitted final picture log, I was sitting by myself in a cinema watching the whole film. And I remember crying so much, thinking this is the first time that I feel like a girl like me has been represented in her fullness and her complexity in a film. And so this film has absolutely changed my relationship to my identity and myself. And I have then come to love myself a lot more, genuinely, not relying on outside love. What I'd love to share with the Taiwanese audience is that actually Taiwan was one of the few countries that recognized the trans guy next to Israel in the 70s. I think you guys should do some research about why that is and how it happened to be like that. That was really interesting. But also, I would love for the film to be taken and for audiences there to think about it in relation to the things that they are facing right now regarding national identity, regarding self-determination, regarding the boundaries and borders and what borders mean, regarding being recognized and not being recognized, and how these questions live next to the questions of what it means to be a human being today, and also to find themselves and find characters that they can relate to in the film. And I'm very happy that it made it there. And I want to thank you for watching the film and engaging it and inviting me to answer these questions. Thank you so much.